in Queensland, would you be surprised if I told you abortion was legal up until birth, through all 40 weeks of pregnancy?
So you can't get an abortion.
You can. It's
you
legal.
Can. That's good.
You think that's good? So
yeah. Well, if she wants to.
Yeah. What about the baby inside of it? What do you think the baby would think about that?
It can't think.
It can't think?
No.
How old's your baby?
35 weeks.
Yeah. And
well,
so
the baby can't think.
Can a newborn baby have thoughts or feelings?
Well, we're not going to be killing newborn babies. We're going to be killing...
What's the difference between Kayla's baby right now and 2 hours later down the road in the hospital where the baby's born? Is there a difference?
I mean, no, you're like...
Is there a difference?
No, I think you should... that's a bit of a weird...
One of the most effective ways to win an argument is to show that your opponent's position has an implausible implication. And this is exactly what Dr. Jo does in her street interview here as she meets this guy who trots out this familiar pro-choice line that unborn humans lack a right to life due to lack of consciousness or thinking ability. If this is the case, then we probably have to conclude that newborns also lack a right to life. But surely this is an absurd implication of this position. And so surely lack of consciousness is a bad reason to deny fetal right to life. And this is the argument that Dr. Jo is implying through her line of questioning. But pro-choicers can use this tactic against pro-lifers as well. And in today's episode, we're going to subject a pro-life argument we've looked at to the same scrutiny and see if it survives. I'm Dr. Emma Wood, and this is The Flip Side. So last week in episode 1 of The Flip Side, we looked at the future like ours argument, or the flow argument for short. And one of the take-home points of the flow argument was that just because the unborn are not conscious in all the ways that we are does not mean that the act of abortion inflicts no harm. In fact, the act of abortion inflicts the same key harm as the wrongful murder of human children or adults, because when a human embryo or fetus is aborted, they are deprived of a future of human experiences. And this deprivation is the same harm that explains why the murder of other humans is wrong. And so, according to the flow argument, at least the vast majority of abortions are seriously morally wrong because human embryos and fetuses also possess a future like ours. Quick side note, when philosophers call an action immoral or morally wrong, what they mean by this is just that the action ought not to be chosen or done. They're not necessarily making any claim about the character or motivations of the person who performs the action in question. And so to say in any given instance that abortion is immoral is not necessarily to say that the woman who has the abortion is an equally immoral person. And this is because moral rightness or wrongness of an action and moral culpability or blameworthiness for an action are actually two different things. We'll explain why this is more in a future episode, but I just wanted to flag this now so that we don't get unnecessarily put off by language or words like immoral or morally wrong. These are just helpful labels that are meant to categorise actions as actions that ought not to be chosen or done. But let's get back to the topic at hand. The future like ours argument makes the claim that abortion is generally immoral because it takes away a future of human experiences from an organism or being that possesses that future. And we might wonder at this point, doesn't the flow argument have a problematic implication? Doesn't it imply that human gametes, that is sperm cells or egg cells, have the right to life as well? After all, many sperm cells and egg cells have futures like ours too, don't they? When I've given the flow argument to pro-choice friends, when I've been in conversation and I've brought this argument up, I've found that people are often quite compelled by this argument. They find this argument surprisingly convincing because it doesn't require any special religious commitments, and the argument starts from pretty common sense assumptions about the wrongfulness of killing that we can all agree on. But one of the questions I've found that people most frequently ask about the flow argument is whether it has this absurd implication about human gametes, that they have a right to life as well. And I think we can agree that if the flow argument does have this implication, this would present a big problem for the argument. And now this wouldn't mean that the unborn therefore don't have a right to life, because there could be other arguments that pro-lifers can appeal to support this claim. The absurd implication about gametes would only show that the flow argument is a bad way of showing that the unborn have the right to life, but there could be other ways of doing so. But thankfully for the flow argument, it doesn't imply that human gametes have a right to life. Why is this? Well, quite simply, it is because human gametes do not, in fact, possess futures of human experience in their current state. Think about the human embryo. Think about what the human embryo is. The human embryo possesses a future of conscious human experiences in exactly the same way that you or I do. Because like you, a human embryo is a complete human organism that is directing itself toward growth and maturation, of which these conscious human experiences are a feature. All it takes for that embryo to move into this future of conscious human experience is safety, nutrition, and time. And the same is true of you. All you need to move into your future of conscious human experience is safety, nutrition, and time. Now, none of this is true of human egg cells or sperm cells. It doesn't matter how nourishing an egg cell's environment is or how much time passes. An egg cell by itself will never become a human child or adult with conscious experiences. Here's a really simple way of explaining this point. You have to do something to a gamete in order to give it a future of human experiences in the first place. You have to change the trajectory it is on in order to give it that kind of future. On the contrary, you have to do something to an embryo or fetus in order to take this future away. When an embryo or fetus is deprived of their human future, they are knocked off a trajectory that currently exists, that they are already on. And taking a human future away from an organism that currently possesses that future is just not morally equivalent to never giving an entity a human future in the first place. The former action is a kind of harm. The latter action is not a harm, because there is nothing to be harmed yet. So gametes do not, in fact, possess a future of human experiences in the way that human embryos and fetuses do. And the flow argument does not imply that gametes have a right to life. Now, the reason why I think that it is so natural for people to make the kind of objection that we've looked at today is because people think of sperm cells and egg cells as potential persons, and people also think of zygotes and embryos and fetuses as potential persons as well, where person is being defined as an organism with some minimal level of conscious capacity. Now, it's important to note that the flow argument is not actually an argument about potential personhood at all. Don Marcus, the originator of the argument, did not view himself as making the argument that fetuses and embryos have the right to life because they are potential persons. But even if the flow argument were making the claim that embryos have the right to life by virtue of being potential persons, there's an important distinction here, because the human gamete and the human embryo are potential persons in completely different ways. A human gamete, or rather a pair of gametes, is only an imaginable physically possible person. In other words, a human gamete is a potential human person in the same kind of way that an oak sapling is a potential chest of drawers. When we look at any given oak sapling, we can realistically imagine its material one day being made into a chest of drawers, just as we can imagine the biological material of a sperm cell being made into a human person. But this kind of change has to be imposed on the object from without, and it is not part of the object's intrinsic nature as it is now. A human embryo, on the contrary, is completely different. A human embryo is a potential human person in the same way that an oak sapling is a potential oak tree. It's not just that we can conceive of or imagine the embryo one day being a human person. This change and this orientation towards this state of existence is actually part of the object's nature itself as it is now. So an embryo is not just merely a conceptual, imaginable, physically possible person. an embryo is a potential person in the making as it is now, and this is a huge difference. Bioethicists and other philosophers refer to this distinction as the distinction between passive potentiality and active potentiality. When pro-choice critics make this gametes have the right to life too style of objection in the literature, they often overlook this distinction. Gametes are only potential persons in the passive sense, whereas human zygotes and embryos are potential persons in the active sense, and it is only the latter that matters morally. And so, if the flow argument's claim that human embryos have futures like ours does imply any claim about an embryo being a potential person, it implies the claim that the embryo is a potential person in the active sense, not the passive sense. And so, even if we do reconceive of the flow argument as an argument about potential personhood, the objection we've looked at today still fails. Unlike the human embryo, the human gamete is not of its own accord on a biological trajectory toward full conscious human experiences. And this is what is meant by the claim that an organism has a future of human experiences, that it is already on this trajectory. And so you can argue for the fetal right to life on the basis of the organism's possession of a human future without also having to make the claim that gametes have a right to life as well. So far, so good for the flow argument. If you like this episode, you know what to do. Please hit that subscribe button, share with your friends, leave a comment, and till next time, I'm Dr. Emma Wood, and this is The Flip Side.